The message came from the dark spaces between stars. It traveled for 10,000 years before anyone found it. The signal was weak and broken, but the computers of the Galactic Concordat managed to piece it together. What they found was a warning from a dead civilization. They had once ruled 1,000 worlds. Their ships had crossed the galaxy when most species still lived in caves. Their weapons had burned suns and cracked moons. They were powerful beyond imagination. And now they were gone. Not a single remained alive anywhere in the known universe. Their final message was simple. It contained only 12 words in their ancient language. When the translation computers finished their work, the words appeared on screens across the Concordat's capital world. Do not attack the humans. They will deny you every final opportunity. Supreme Admiral of the read the message 3 times. He stood in the war room of his flagship, surrounded by his officers. The blue light of holographic displays painted shadows across his gray, scaled face. His yellow eyes narrowed as he considered the words. "What does this mean?" asked one of his junior officers. "What final opportunity?" Made a sound of disgust. It came from deep in his throat, a rumble that showed his contempt. "It means nothing," he said. "They are dust. Their empire is forgotten, and they want us to fear some primitive species from a small corner of the galaxy." He waved his clawed hand and the message disappeared from the screen. In its place appeared a star map. A tiny cluster of 17 worlds glowed green against the black emptiness. This was human space. 17 planets, a few hundred ships, perhaps 4 billion people in total. The Galactic Concordat controlled over 2,000 worlds. Their fleet numbered in the tens of thousands. They had ruled the galaxy for 300 years, ever since they had crushed the last of the old empires. They were the warrior heart of the Concordat. They had never lost a war. They had never retreated from a battle. And now some long-dead species wanted them to fear humans. Laughed, the sound echoed through the war room. His officers joined him, though some of them looked uncertain. "Sir," said Commander, his second in command, "perhaps we should study this warning further. They were not fools, if they felt the need to send this message." "They are dead," interrupted. "Whatever killed them, it was not these humans. Look at them." He pointed at the star map. "They have been traveling through space for barely 3 centuries. They have no great fleets, no planet-killing weapons, no psionic abilities. They are weak. They are young. They are nothing." Lowered his head in submission, but his eyes still showed doubt. "As you say, Admiral." The truth was that had other reasons to ignore the warning. The humans had become a problem. Not a military problem, but an economic one. Human traders had spread across the galaxy in the last 50 years. They went everywhere, traded with everyone, and somehow always managed to find the best deals. Worse, they refused to pay tribute to the Concordat. Every species that operated in Concordat space was required to pay a percentage of their profits to the ruling council. It was the law. It had been the law for 300 years, but the humans simply ignored it. When Concordat tax collectors visited human stations, they were met with polite smiles and endless paperwork. The humans never said no directly. They just delayed and confused and redirected until the collectors gave up. When Concordat officials tried to seize human goods, the humans would file complaints in 17 different legal systems at once. The cases would drag on for years, costing more than the seized goods were worth. It was infuriating. It was disrespectful, and had decided it would end. "Send a message to the human government," he ordered. "Tell them they have 30 days to pay all outstanding tribute. If they refuse, we will take it from them by force." The message was sent. 29 days passed without a response. On the 30th day, a single human ship appeared at the edge of Concordat space. It was small and unarmed, a diplomatic vessel. Agreed to meet with the human ambassador. He expected begging. He expected desperate offers of payment. He expected fear. The human who walked into his war room was none of these things. She was a small female with dark skin and gray hair. She wore simple clothes without decoration or rank insignia. Her name was Ambassador, and she smiled when she saw the Admiral. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said. Her voice was calm and warm. "I understand there has been some confusion about our trading arrangements." "There is no confusion," said. He towered over her, his massive scaled body meant to intimidate. "You owe tribute. You have not paid. This is simple." Ambassador nodded slowly. "I see, and if we continue to disagree about what we owe, then we will take what we are owed, and more." The ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Her dark eyes studied his face with an expression he could not read. Then she sighed. "Admiral," she said softly, "I was sent here to give you one chance to reconsider, not because we fear you, not because we cannot defend ourselves, but because of what will happen if you attack us." Felt anger rise in his chest. "Is that a threat?" "No, it is a warning." Ambassador reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. She pressed a button, and a holographic image appeared in the air between them. It showed the same message from the same 12 words. "Do not attack the humans. They will deny you every final opportunity." "We found this message too," said. "We found it 100 years ago. We have spent a long time thinking about what it means. We think we understand now." "Then explain it to me," growled. "What final opportunity? Death. You think we fear death. We are warriors. Death in battle is the highest honor." Ambassador's smile faded. Something sad passed across her face, something that almost looked like pity. "That is exactly what we were afraid of," she said quietly. "Admiral, I am asking you one last time. Do not attack us. Not for our sake, for yours." His patience ended. He slammed his fist on the table between them. "Enough! You come into my ship and threaten me. You dare. Your little worlds will burn for this insult." Ambassador did not flinch. She simply nodded and turned toward the door. "I will tell my government that negotiations have failed. I am sorry, Admiral. I truly am." She left. Her ship departed Concordat space an hour later. Assembled his fleet that same night. 40 warships, each one capable of burning a continent. He did not need 40 ships to destroy a single human colony. He wanted to send a message. He wanted the humans to understand what happened to species who the Concordat. He chose his target carefully. New Meridian was the 3rd largest human colony. 2 million people lived there. It was a farming world covered in green fields and small towns. It had no military value, no defenses worth mentioning. It was soft. It was vulnerable. It was perfect. The fleet arrived at New Meridian 3 days later. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, surrounding the small blue and green world, stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the planet. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let them see what is coming." His communication officer obeyed. Screens across the planet would now show his face. Every human on New Meridian would hear his words. "People of New Meridian," announced, "your government has insulted the Galactic Concordat. They have refused to pay what they owe. They have threatened us with war. This is the consequence of their arrogance." He paused, enjoying the moment. "You have 1 hour to evacuate, take what you can carry, leave everything else. After 1 hour, this world will burn. This is mercy. This is more than you deserve. Use your time wisely." He cut the transmission and waited. The humans did not beg. They did not plead. Small ships began lifting off from the surface, carrying people away from the cities and towns. Watch them go. He could have destroyed those ships easily, but he wanted survivors. He wanted witnesses who would spread the story of what happened to those who the Concordat. 1 hour passed. The evacuation ships were gone, but most of the population remained on the surface. There had not been enough time, not enough ships to save everyone. Felt nothing. This was war. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong survived and the weak burned. "Begin bombardment," he ordered. The first plasma strikes hit the largest city at exactly midnight local time. The sky turned orange and then white. Buildings melted. Streets became rivers of glass. The screaming lasted only seconds before there was no one left to scream. The bombardment continued for 6 hours. Every city, every town, every farm. The green fields blackened and died. The oceans boiled at their edges. 2 million humans died in a single night. Some died quickly in the initial strikes. Others died slowly as the atmosphere filled with ash and poison. When it was over, looked down at the dead world and felt satisfied. This was a victory. This was justice. This was how the solved problems. He opened a channel to Concordat Command. "New Meridian has been," he reported. "The humans will now understand the cost of defiance. I expect their full surrender within the week." He was wrong. The first sign that something was different came 3 days later. A human trade ship was scheduled to arrive at Concordat Station 12. It never appeared. The station sent messages asking about the delay. There was no response. Then another human ship failed to arrive, and another. Within a week, every human vessel in Concordat space had vanished. Every human trader, every human diplomat, every human traveler. Gone. The Concordat sent scouts to human space. The scouts found nothing. Human stations were empty. Human colonies were dark. Billions of people had simply disappeared. Was confused but not worried. "They are hiding," he told his officers. "They are afraid. They will surrender soon." But days passed and there was no surrender. Weeks passed and there was only silence. The silence was worse than any threat. It was like waiting for a storm that never came. Sent more scouts. He sent them deeper into human territory, past the 17 known colonies into the unexplored regions beyond. None of them returned. They did not send distress signals. They did not report attacks. They simply stopped transmitting and disappeared. 3 months passed. The Concordat Council began to worry. They sent messages to demanding answers. Where were the humans? What were they planning? When would they surrender? Had no answers. He had never fought an enemy like this. Every species he had ever conquered had reacted the same way to aggression. They fought back, or they surrendered, or they died. The humans did none of these things. They simply vanished like ghosts, leaving nothing behind but empty stations and silent worlds. And then, on the 91st day after New Meridian, the silence ended. Was sleeping in his quarters when the alarms began. He rushed to the bridge in his sleeping clothes, his heart's pounding. His officers were staring at their screens with expressions of shock and disbelief. Reports demanded, "What is happening?" Commander turned to face him. The second officer's scales had gone pale. His hands were trembling. "Sir," said, "we are receiving reports from across the Concordat. Human ships have appeared simultaneously at 17 of our worlds. They came out of nowhere. No warning, no detection. They just appeared." Grabbed the nearest console and pulled up the tactical data. What he saw made his blood run cold. The human ships were unlike anything he had ever seen. They were not built like normal vessels. Their shapes were wrong, twisted, as if they existed in more dimensions than they should. They moved without engines, without visible propulsion. They simply slid through space like shadows moving across a wall. And there were thousands of them. Hal whispered, "How is this possible? Where did they get these ships?" No one answered. No one could answer. The humans had been a minor species with a handful of outdated vessels. Now they had a fleet that dwarfed the entire Concordat Navy. The first reports of combat began coming in. Concordat ships opened fire on the human vessels. The weapons hit nothing. Energy beams passed through the human ships as if they were not there. Missiles exploded harmlessly in empty space. Then the humans fired back. Their weapons did not behave like normal weapons. They did not shoot projectiles or energy beams. Instead, they seemed to reach out and touch their targets. Concordat ships simply stopped working. Engines died. Weapons went offline. Life support continued, but everything else failed. The Concordat fleet was disabled in less than an hour. Not destroyed. Disabled. Every ship was left floating helplessly in space, its crew alive but unable to fight or flee. Watched the tactical display as world after world fell silent. Not dead silent, just quiet. The human ships would appear, disable the defenses, and then wait. They did not bombard cities. They did not massacre civilians. They simply waited, surrounding each world with an impenetrable ring of those impossible vessels. "Sir," said, his voice barely a whisper, "they are hailing us." Straightened his back. He was a warrior. He would not show fear even now. Put them through. The main screen flickered and a human face appeared. It was Ambassador. She looked exactly the same as she had 3 months ago. Calm, quiet, a little sad. "Admiral," she said, "I told you we would give you one chance. You chose not to take it. Now we will show you what it means to attack humanity." "Then show me," roared. "Destroy my fleet, burn my worlds, do your worst." Ambassador shook her head slowly. "No, Admiral, we will not destroy you. We will not burn your worlds. We will not give you the war you want, the death you expect, the ending your people dream about." She leaned forward slightly, and her dark eyes seemed to look directly into his soul. 2 million people died on New Meridian. You killed them to send a message. Now we will send our own message, and you will live long enough to understand it. Every last one of you will live. The transmission ended. Stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by his helpless officers and his dead fleet. The human ships hung in space around them, silent and patient. And for the first time in his life, Supreme Admiral of the felt something he had never felt before. He felt afraid. Not of death. Death he understood, death he welcomed. He was afraid because he was beginning to understand what they had tried to tell them. He was afraid because he was starting to see what the humans meant by final opportunity. And he was afraid because he realized, in that cold and terrible moment, that the humans had no intention of letting him die. The war had begun, but it was not the kind of war they had ever fought before. It was not a war of destruction and glory and heroic last stands. It was something else entirely. And understood with growing horror that he had no idea how to fight it. Prime was the first world to fall. It was a colony, home to 300 million warriors and their families. It had been a symbol of strength for 200 years. Now it would become something else entirely. A lesson, a message, a warning to everyone who thought they understood what humans were capable of. The human fleet arrived at Prime on a quiet morning. They came from directions that should not have existed. Their ships slid out of spaces between spaces, appearing like shadows forming in bright sunlight. The planetary defense grid detected them only after they had already surrounded the world. General commanded the defense of Prime. He was old for a nearly 80 years old, with scars covering his body from a lifetime of battles. He had fought in 17 wars. He had killed enemies with his bare claws. He had never retreated from anything. When his officers reported the human arrival, felt a strange mixture of relief and excitement. Finally, the enemy had come. Finally, there would be real fighting. The 3 months of silence had been torture for they were warriors. They needed conflict like they needed air. "Power up all weapons," ordered. "Launch all fighters. Show these humans what happens when they challenge thee on our own ground." His fleet launched from orbital stations around the planet. 200 warships, each one crewed by experienced soldiers who had trained their whole lives for this moment. They formed into battle formations and charged toward the human vessels. The human ships did not move. They simply hung there in the black emptiness, waiting. Watched from his command center on the planet's surface, he expected to see explosions. He expected to see debris fields forming as his ships tore through the human fleet. Instead, he saw something impossible. His ships began to slow down, not because they chose to, but because they could not continue. Their engines simply stopped working. Weapons went silent. Communication systems failed. 200 warships became 200 floating coffins in a matter of minutes. "What is happening?" demanded. "Report, someone report." His communications officer shook his head helplessly. "Sir, we have lost contact with the entire fleet, all of them, at the same time." Slammed his fist against the console. The metal dented under his blow. "Ground defenses. Activate the planetary shields. Prepare the surface batteries." But even as he gave the orders, he could see that it was useless. The human ships were descending now, passing through the planetary shields as if they did not exist. The shields flickered and died without any visible damage. The surface batteries fired, but their plasma bolts passed harmlessly through the enemy vessels. The humans landed their first troops at dawn. Expected monsters. He expected war machines and death squads and soldiers hungry for revenge. What he saw confused him. The human soldiers wore simple armor. They carried weapons, yes, but they did not fire them. They moved through the streets of the capital city in organized groups, but they did not attack anyone. Instead, they set up strange equipment at every intersection. Screens and speakers and medical stations. "Citizens of Prime," a calm voice announced from every speaker. "Please remain in your homes. You will not be harmed. Repeat, you will not be harmed. Medical assistance will be provided to anyone who needs it. Food and water will be distributed shortly." Could not believe what he was hearing. This was not an invasion. This was not a war. This was something else, something wrong. He gathered his remaining soldiers and led them personally into the streets. They were going to fight. They were going to show these humans that they would never surrender. They would die with honor, weapons in hand, screaming their war cries until the very end. The first human patrol they encountered did not fight back. The soldiers saw the charging warriors and simply stepped aside. They moved out of the way like water flowing around a rock. Grabbed one of the humans by the throat. It was a young male, barely more than a child by standards. The human did not struggle. He did not scream for help. He just looked at with calm brown eyes. "Fight me," roared. "Defend yourself." "No," the human said. His voice was quiet but steady. "We are not here to fight you. We are here to help you." Threw the human to the ground. His claws extended, ready to tear the soft creature apart. But before he could strike, something happened. A wave of pressure washed over him, and suddenly he could not move. His muscles locked in place. His body became a statue. More humans approached. They were carrying medical equipment. "Paralysis field," one of them explained to, as if discussing the weather. "Temporary, does not hurt. You will be able to move again in about an hour." They laid down gently on the street. A human medic examined him, checking his vital signs and scanning his body for injuries. When they found old wounds that had not healed properly, they treated them. When they discovered a tumor growing near his spine that he had not known about, they marked it for surgery. Could not speak. He could not move. He could only watch as the humans treated him like a patient rather than an enemy. "You are going to be okay," the medic told him. She was a small female with red hair and freckled skin. "We will take good care of you, all of you." An hour later could move again. He found himself in a comfortable room with a window overlooking the city. The city was not burning. The buildings still stood. People walked the streets, looking confused but unharmed. A human officer came to speak with him. The officer was an older male with gray hair and tired eyes. His uniform was plain, without decoration or medals. "General," the officer said, "my name is Colonel Harrison. I am in charge of the transition on Prime." "Transition," growled. "You mean occupation, you mean conquest." Colonel Harrison shook his head. "No, I mean transition. What happened on New Meridian cannot be undone. 2 million of our people died. Nothing will bring them back. but we have decided that more death is not the answer. Stared at him. Then what is the answer? What do you want from us? We want you to live, Harrison said simply. We want you to build. We want you to change. We want you to become something better than what you are now. And if we refuse, if we fight you, then we will stop you from fighting. We will keep you alive no matter how hard you try to die. We will wait. We are very patient. Felt rage building in his chest. This is madness. We are warriors. We would rather die than accept this humiliation. I know, Harrison said. His voice was soft and sad. That is exactly why we will not let you die. The occupation of Prime continued for months. The humans did not behave like any conquerors they had ever known. They did not execute leaders. They did not rape or pillage or destroy. Instead, they did something far more disturbing. They helped. When a child was sick, human doctors healed her. When a factory broke down, human engineers repaired it. When crops failed, human supply ships brought food. The humans fixed everything that was broken and improved everything that worked. And they kept everyone alive. This was the worst part. They were warriors. Their culture was built on honor and sacrifice. The highest glory a could achieve was death in battle. The greatest shame was to die old in a bed, having never proven yourself in combat. The humans understood this. They understood it perfectly, and they used it against them like a weapon. Every suicide attempt was stopped. Human medical teams had technology that could bring people back from the edge of death. When soldiers tried to kill themselves rather than live under occupation, the humans saved them. Every time, without exception. When commanders activated their ships' self-destruct systems, they found that the systems had been disabled. When warriors challenged human soldiers to honorable combat, the humans refused. When generals ordered their troops to charge into certain death, the humans paralyzed them with non-lethal fields. General tried to die 17 times. He tried poison, which the humans neutralized. He tried drowning, which the humans prevented. He tried stabbing himself through the heart, which the humans surgically repaired. Each time he woke up in a clean hospital bed, his wounds healed, his body healthy, his despair growing. After his 17th attempt, Colonel Harrison came to visit him again. Why? Asked. His voice was broken. He had screamed until his throat was raw. Why will you not let me die? Is this revenge? Is this punishment? Harrison sat down beside the bed. He was quiet for a long moment before he spoke. When I was a boy, he said, my grandfather told me stories about the old wars on Earth, wars between human nations. Millions of people died in those wars. Cities burned. Countries were destroyed. And you know what we learned? Said nothing. We learned that killing your enemies does not solve anything. The children of your enemies grow up hating you. They start new wars. The cycle never ends. Harrison looked at with those tired eyes. So we stopped trying to kill our enemies. We started trying to change them instead. This is worse than killing, whispered. This is torture. No, Harrison said. This is patience. You have spent your whole life believing that death in battle is the greatest honor. We are going to keep you alive long enough to discover that there are other kinds of honor, building things, protecting the weak, creating instead of destroying. I will never change. None of us will ever change. Harrison smiled sadly. That is what they all say at first. Give it 50 years. Give it 100 years. You would be surprised what time can do. Was assigned a job, not hard labor, not punishment. He was given a role in the new government of Prime. His knowledge of society was valuable, the humans said. They wanted his help in making the transition easier. At first, refused to participate. He sat in his office and did nothing. The humans did not punish him. They did not threaten him. They just waited. After 3 months, boredom became unbearable. Started reading the documents on his desk. He started attending meetings. He started making suggestions about how to improve the distribution of food and medicine. He told himself he was only doing it to survive. He told himself he was looking for weaknesses to exploit. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered something else. 1 year after the occupation began, walked through the capital city. It looked different now. The military monuments had been replaced with parks. The weapons factories had been converted to build farming equipment. Children played in streets that had once been marching grounds for soldiers. A young girl ran up to him. She could not have been more than 8 years old. In the old days, she would have been training with weapons already. Now she was holding a flower. "Look what I grew," she said proudly. "The human teacher showed me how." Looked at the flower. It was small and blue with delicate petals. He had never paid attention to flowers before. Warriors did not care about such things. "It is beautiful," he said. The words surprised him. He had not meant to say them. The girl smiled and ran off to show her flower to someone else. Stood there for a long time, watching the children play. He thought about his own childhood, which had been nothing but training and discipline and preparation for war. He thought about the 17 times he had tried to die. He thought about what Harrison had said about patience and change. He was not ready to admit anything yet. The anger and shame were still too strong. But something had shifted inside him, a small crack in the wall he had built around his heart. The humans noticed. They always noticed. A young human woman approached him that evening. She introduced herself as a counselor, someone trained to help people deal with difficult emotions. "You do not have to talk to me," she said. "I just want you to know that I am here if you ever want to." Almost refused, almost walked away, but something made him stop. "I do not understand you," he said. "I do not understand why you are doing this. We killed 2 million of your people. We burned your world. And you respond with this." He gestured at the peaceful city around them. "Flowers and children and counselors." The woman nodded slowly. "I know it does not make sense to you. Not yet. But let me ask you something. What would have happened if we had done what you expected? If we had burned Prime in return? If we had killed 300 million to avenge our 2 million? Thought about it. You would have shown us that you were strong. You would have earned our respect. And then what? Your children would have grown up hating us. They would have waited for their chance to take revenge, and the killing would continue forever." She shook her head. "We decided a long time ago that we did not want to play that game anymore." "Then what do you want?" The woman looked at him with eyes full of something he could not name. Compassion, perhaps, or hope. "We want you to see you grow old," she said. "We want you to sit in a garden someday and realize that you are happy, even though you never died in battle. We want you to understand that there are things worth living for, not just things worth dying for." Felt tears forming in his eyes. He had not cried since he was a child. Warriors did not cry, but he was not sure anymore what warriors were supposed to do. "I am not ready," he said, his voice cracked. "That is okay," the woman replied. "We have time. We have all the time in the world." She left him there, standing in the park as the sun set over a city that had not burned. Watched the light fade and the stars appear. Somewhere up there, human ships still surrounded the planet, patient and silent. He thought about the old warning. They will deny you every final opportunity. He was beginning to understand what it meant. The humans were not just denying them death. They were denying them the entire identity that they had built over thousands of years. They were taking away the one thing that gave lives meaning, the glorious end, the warrior's death, the eternal honor of falling in battle. And they were replacing it with something else, something strange and frightening and completely unknown. Life, just life. A long, peaceful, ordinary life with no glory and no honor and no dramatic ending. For a species that had always measured worth by the manner of death, this was the fate imaginable. And the humans knew it. They had always known it. Sank to his knees in the grass and wept. He wept for his lost honor. He wept for his failed suicide attempts. He wept for the warrior he had been and the man he was being forced to become. But somewhere deep inside, beneath all the grief and shame, a tiny part of him felt something unexpected. Relief. Admiral refused to accept defeat. For 6 months he had watched world after world fall to the humans, and not once had he seen the kind of destruction he understood. No cities burned, no populations massacred, no leaders executed. The humans simply arrived, disabled all resistance, and began their strange work of transformation. Reports came from the occupied worlds, reports that made no sense. Hospitals being built, schools being opened, former warriors being given jobs as teachers and farmers and builders, children learning human languages alongside their own, families sitting down to meals that included both and human foods. It was obscene. It was wrong. It was everything they had spent their entire history fighting against. Gathered the remaining free fleets of the Concordat. 200 warships answered his call. They came from every species in the Alliance, united by their shared horror at what was happening. The Collective sent 40 ships. The Dominion sent 30. Even the mysterious silicates, who rarely involved themselves in organic affairs, contributed a small squadron. "This is our final stand," announced to the assembled commanders. They met on his flagship, the Eternal Fury, in the war room where he had once dismissed the warning. That felt like a lifetime ago now. "The humans have shown us their strategy," he continued. "They do not want to kill us. They want to change us. They want to take everything we are and twist it into something weak and soft. This is worse than death. This is the destruction of our very souls." The commanders nodded in agreement. They had all seen the reports. They had all watched their warriors transformed into farmers and their generals turned into teachers. The thought terrified them more than any weapon ever could. "We will attack there," declared, "Earth itself. If we can destroy it, we cut off the head of this strange monster. And if we fail—" He paused and looked around the room. "If we fail, we die. We die as warriors should, in battle with glory." The commanders cheered. This was what they needed to hear. A chance to fight. A chance to die properly. A chance to escape the terrible fate that awaited them if the humans won. The fleet departed the next morning. 200 ships, carrying the last hope of the Concordat, aimed at the heart of human space. They traveled for 3 weeks through empty regions of the galaxy where human ships had not yet penetrated. They were careful. They were quiet. They avoided all contact with human patrols. But the humans were waiting for them. Should have known. The humans always seemed to know. They appeared out of nowhere, surrounding the Concordat fleet in a sphere of those impossible ships. Thousands of vessels, more than had ever seen, gathered in one place. "All ships battle stations," roared. "This is the moment we have been waiting for. Fight with everything you have. Die with honor." The Concordat fleet opened fire. Plasma beams lit up the darkness. Missiles streaked toward their targets. Nuclear warheads detonated in brilliant flashes of light. For a moment, felt hope surge in his chest. They were fighting. They were doing something. But the human ships simply absorbed the attacks. The beams passed through them without effect. The missiles exploded harmlessly in empty space. The nuclear blasts washed over the hulls without leaving a mark. Then the humans fired back. It was not like any weapon had ever seen. There was no beam, no projectile, no explosion. Instead, something reached out and touched each Concordat ship, and wherever it touched, systems failed. Engines died. Weapons went silent. Shields collapsed. In less than 1 hour, the entire Concordat fleet was disabled. 200 ships floated helplessly in the void, their crews alive but unable to fight. Stood on the bridge of the Eternal Fury and watched the tactical displays go dark one by one. Around him, his officers sat in shocked silence. They had expected to die. They had prepared for death. They had welcomed it. "Sir," Commander said quietly, "they are hailing us." "Put them through." The flickered to life, showing Ambassador's familiar face. She looked older now, tired, but her eyes were as calm as ever. "Admiral," she said, "it is over. Your fleet is disabled. Your worlds are in our hands. The galactic concordat has fallen." "Then kill us," replied. His voice was steady despite the trembling in his hands. "We are defeated. Grant us the warrior's death we deserve." Shook her head slowly. "No, Admiral, I told you from the beginning, we do not kill our enemies, we change them. This is not mercy, this is cruelty. You torture us with your kindness." "I know that is how it feels to you now," said, "but someday you will understand. Someday you will be grateful that we kept you alive. Someday you will look back at this moment and realize that it was the beginning of something new, something better. I will never understand. I will fight you until my last breath." Smiled sadly. "Your last breath will be many, many years from now, Admiral. I promise you that. You will die old. You will die in peace. And you will have had a long time to think about everything that happened." The transmission ended. Minutes later, human boarding parties entered the Eternal Fury. They moved through the ship without resistance, their strange paralysis fields disabling any warrior who tried to fight. They were efficient and calm, treating the crew more like patients than prisoners. Waited for them on the bridge. He had a ceremonial blade in his hand, the same blade his father had carried and his father before him. A admiral did not surrender. A admiral died fighting. When the human soldiers entered the bridge, charged at them with a roar. He was old, but he was still fast. He was still strong. He had killed dozens of enemies with this blade. The humans did not shoot him. They did not even raise their weapons. Instead, one of them pointed a small device at him and suddenly could not move. The paralysis field locked his muscles in place. His momentum carried him forward, but he was as stiff as a statue. He fell face first onto the deck, the blade clattering from his frozen fingers. "Careful with him," one of the humans said. "He is important. Make sure he is not injured." They picked him up gently and carried him to a medical bay. Human doctors examined him, treating the small injuries he had sustained in his fall. They found a problem with one of his hearts, something that would have killed him in a few years, and they scheduled surgery to repair it. Could not speak. He could only listen as the humans discussed his health, his treatment plan, his rehabilitation schedule. They talked about him as if he were a patient recovering from an illness, not a prisoner of war. The paralysis wore off after an hour. Found himself in a comfortable room with a window overlooking Earth. The planet was beautiful, he had to admit. Blue oceans and white clouds and green land. It looked peaceful. It looked nothing like the of a species that had conquered the galaxy in a few short months. A human guard brought him food. It was good food, carefully prepared to meet dietary needs. Threw it against the wall. "I will not eat your food. I will starve myself. You cannot keep me alive if I refuse to eat." The guard was a young female with short black hair. She did not seem bothered by his outburst. She simply cleaned up the mess and brought more food. "We have feeding tubes," she said calmly. "We can keep you nourished for years without your cooperation, but we would prefer if you chose to eat on your own. The food really is quite good." Stared at her. "What kind of monsters are you? You take everything from us, our honor, our death, our very identity, and you speak as if you are doing us a favor." The guard thought about this for a moment. "May I tell you something, Admiral, something personal?" Did not respond, but the guard continued anyway. "My grandmother lived on New Meridian. She died when your fleet bombed the planet. I was 12 years old. I remember watching the news, seeing the fires from space. I remember screaming for hours." Felt something twist in his chest. Not guilt exactly. He had not learned guilt yet, but something uncomfortable. "And yet you do not want revenge?" he asked. "You do not want to see me suffer?" "I did," the guard admitted. "For a long time I did. I wanted to hurt you. I wanted to hurt everyone who was responsible for my grandmother's death." She paused. "But then I understood something. If I kill you, I become like you. If I hurt you, I become what I hate. The cycle never ends. So instead, you keep me alive to torture me with your mercy." The guard shook her head. "No, Admiral, we keep you alive because we believe you can change. We believe that in 20 or 30 or 50 years, you will look back at what you did on New Meridian and feel genuinely sorry for it. We believe you will become a different person, a better person." "I will never be sorry. I did what had to be done." "That is what you believe now," the guard said. "Ask me again in 50 years. She left him alone with his food. Eventually, hunger won out over pride and ate. The food was good, just as she had said. The trial began 3 months later. It was not the kind of trial expected. There were no crowds baying for his blood, no politicians making speeches about justice. Instead, there was a quiet courtroom with human and lawyers arguing about evidence and procedure. Was charged with the murder of 2 million civilians, not war crimes, not genocide, simple murder. The prosecution presented evidence of his orders, his communications, his personal involvement in the bombardment of New Meridian. The defense argued about context and military necessity. In the end, was found guilty. The sentence was life imprisonment, not death, life. When the judge read the sentence, laughed. The sound echoed through the silent courtroom. "You fools," he said. "You think a prison can hold me. You think I will not find a way to die. Every day I will try, every single day. You cannot watch me forever." The judge looked at him with something like pity. "Admiral, you will serve your sentence at a rehabilitation facility on Luna, Earth's moon. You will have access to education, counseling, and recreational activities. You will be treated with dignity and respect. And yes, we will watch you, every day, for as long as it takes." The rehabilitation facility was not what expected. It was not a prison. It was more like a small town, with houses and gardens and common spaces. The other residents were war criminals from a dozen different species. All of them had committed terrible acts. All of them were being kept alive against their will. Tried to die 47 times in the first year. Each time, the humans saved him. They had technology that could repair almost any injury. They had surveillance systems that detected suicide attempts before they happened. They had medical staff on call around the clock, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. After his 47th attempt, a human counselor came to see him. Her name was Dr. Sarah Park, and she had been assigned to his case from the beginning. "Admiral," she said, sitting across from him in his small living room, "you are using considerable energy trying to die. What if you used that energy for something else? Like what? Becoming a farmer, learning to paint, pretending that I am not a warrior." "You will always be a warrior," Dr. Park said. "That is part of who you are. But maybe you can be a warrior for something different, something that does not require killing." Snorted with contempt. "There is no honor in peace." "Is that true?" Dr. Park asked. "Or is that just what you were taught?" She left a book with him. It was a history of Earth written for non-humans. Ignored it for weeks. Then, out of boredom, he started reading. The book told stories of human warriors who had fought for peace. People who had risked their lives not to kill enemies, but to protect the innocent. Soldiers who had refused orders to massacre civilians. Leaders who had chosen reconciliation over revenge. It was strange. It was confusing. It did not match anything new about war and honor. He finished the book and asked for more. Dr. Park brought him histories of human conflicts, biographies of human leaders, philosophical texts about human values. Read them all, looking for weaknesses, looking for lies. He did not find what he was looking for. Instead, he found questions. Uncomfortable questions that kept him awake at night. 2 years passed. Stopped trying to kill himself. He told himself it was only because he had realized it was impossible. But something else had changed too. He had started thinking about New Meridian, not about the military necessity of the attack, not about the message he had intended to send. He had started thinking about the people. 2 million people, families, children, grandparents, people who had done nothing wrong except live in the wrong place at the wrong time, people who had burned while he watched from orbit. He had never thought about them before. They had been numbers, statistics, collateral damage. Now they were starting to become real. "This is your doing," he accused Dr. Park during one of their sessions. "You are putting these thoughts in my head. You are manipulating me." "I am just talking to you," Dr. Park replied. "The thoughts are your own. I do not want them. Take them back." "I cannot do that, Admiral. Once you start thinking, you cannot stop. That is the burden of consciousness." Wept that night, not for himself. For the first time in his life, he wept for someone else. He wept for the 2 million people he had killed. He wept for their families. He wept for the children who had looked up at the sky and seen death coming. The next morning, he asked Dr. Park for information about the victims, their names, their stories, their lives. "Why?" she asked. "Because I want to know who they were," said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Because I owe them that much." Dr. Park brought him the files. There were 2 million of them. Started reading. He read for 5 years. Every day for hours he read about the people he had killed, a teacher who had loved botany, a child who had wanted to be a pilot, an old woman who had made the best pasta in her city. 2 million stories, 2 million lives ended by his order. When he finished, he was a different person. The arrogant admiral who had dismissed the warning was gone. In his place was an old man who understood, finally, what he had done. "I am sorry," he told Dr. Park. The words felt inadequate. The words felt meaningless, but they were all he had. "I know," she said. "It does not fix anything." "No, but it is a beginning." Asked to speak with the families of his victims. Some of them agreed. Some of them screamed at him. Some of them wept. Some of them forgave him. Many did not. He met with them anyway, one by one, for years. He was becoming what the humans wanted him to become. He knew this. He hated it sometimes, but he could not stop. The change was happening whether he wanted it or not. And somewhere, deep inside, beneath all the grief and shame and regret, a tiny voice whispered that maybe this was not such a terrible thing after all. Maybe there was honor in growth. Maybe there was glory in becoming better. Maybe they had not been warning the Concordat about destruction. Maybe they had been warning them about redemption. And maybe redemption was the fate of all for those who did not believe they deserved it. 20 years had passed since the fall of the Galactic Concordat. The old order was gone, replaced by something new, something strange, something that no one had expected. The Human Coalition, they called it, not an empire, not a dominion, a coalition. The humans insisted on the name. They said empires were built on conquest and fear. Coalitions were built on cooperation and choice. It did not feel like a choice to the species who had been absorbed into it. The, and dozens of others had not voted to join. They had been defeated and transformed, their warriors turned into farmers, their generals made into teachers. But the humans kept using words like partnership and cooperation and mutual benefit. The words felt like lies at first. Then slowly they began to feel like something else, something that might actually be true. Was an old historian. He had been young when the war began, barely 30 years old, too young to fight but old enough to remember. He remembered the fear when the human ships appeared. He remembered the confusion when the occupation began. He remembered watching his father, a decorated general, transform over the decades from a proud warrior into a gentle old man who spent his days gardening. His father had died 2 years ago, peacefully, in his sleep, after a long life filled with things that had nothing to do with war, still did not know how to feel about that. Now worked in the Coalition archives on Earth. It was a massive complex, covering thousands of square kilometers, housing the preserved histories of every civilization humanity had ever encountered. The archives were open to everyone. Any species could visit. Any individual could study. The humans believed that understanding the past was the key to building a better future. Had spent 15 years studying the fall of the Concordat. He had read every document, watched every recording, interviewed every surviving witness. He thought he understood what had happened, but then he discovered something that changed everything. It began with a request from a young human researcher named. She was studying ancient civilizations, species that had existed before the Concordat, before they became warriors, before any living memory. "Can you help me find the archives?" she asked one morning. "I know they existed. The records say humans collected everything when they encountered but I cannot find where it is stored." The ancient species who had sent the warning that had ignored, that had started everything, had always wondered about them. Who were they? What had happened to them? How had they known about humanity? "I will help you look," he said. They searched for 3 days. The archives were vast and the materials were not stored with the other historical collections. Eventually, found a reference in an old database. The archives were kept in a special section, accessible only by request. The section was called the Museum of Inherited Civilizations. Felt a chill when he read that name. Inherited. The humans had inherited what did that mean? They submitted their request and received approval within hours. A human archivist led them through corridors had never seen before, deeper and deeper into the complex. The walls changed from modern materials to something older, much older. Realized they were walking through structures that had been built centuries ago, possibly longer. "This is one of our oldest collections," the archivist explained. "The materials were gathered almost 400 years ago, long before the Concordat, long before your people came to space." 400 years. Did the math in his head. That meant the humans had encountered when humanity was just beginning its expansion into the galaxy, when they were still a small species with only a few dozen colonies. How did early humans defeat asked. They ruled 1,000 worlds. Humanity was nothing back then. The archivist smiled mysteriously. "You should see the materials for yourself. I think you will find them educational." The section of the archives was enormous. Thousands of rooms filled with artifacts, documents, recordings, and personal effects. They themselves were displayed in holographic recreations, tall beings with silver skin and 4 arms, elegant and terrifying. Began studying the artifacts, but was drawn to the historical documents. He found the records of first contact between humans and he began to read. The story was nothing like what he had expected. They had discovered humanity 200 years after humans left Earth. At that time, humanity had only 30 colonies and a few hundred ships. They had thousands of worlds and fleets that blocked out the stars. When they found humanity, they demanded submission, tribute, worship. They wanted humans to serve them, to fuel their endless expansion across the galaxy. They were not evil by their own standards. They simply believed that strength deserved to rule and weakness deserved to serve. The human response was unexpected. They did not fight. They did not surrender. They simply said no. "We do not worship anyone," the human ambassador had said according to the records. "We do not serve anyone. We are willing to trade. We are willing to talk, but we will not bow." They were outraged. They sent a fleet to teach humanity a lesson. A small fleet by their standards. Only 100 ships. Enough to burn a few colonies and remind the humans of their place. The fleet arrived at a human colony called Hope's Landing. 50,000 people lived there. The commander gave them 1 hour to evacuate before the bombardment began. The humans evacuated as many as they could. But when the hour ended and the bombardment began, something strange happened. The weapons failed. Their ships lost power. Their crews found themselves paralyzed by forces they could not understand. The humans had been preparing. Even then, centuries ago, they had been developing the technology that would later defeat the Concordat. They had known that sooner or later, someone would try to conquer them. They had decided they would not be conquered, but they had also decided they would not become conquerors themselves. The fleet was disabled, not destroyed. The crews were captured, not killed. The humans treated them well, gave them medical care, tried to communicate with them. They did not understand. They expected death. They expected slavery. They expected the kind of treatment they would have given to a defeated enemy. Instead, they received kindness. It confused them. It frightened them. When the Empire sent a larger fleet, the same thing happened. And again and again. The humans never attacked space. They never tried to conquer worlds. They simply defended themselves, disabled attacking fleets, and released the captured crews. The war lasted 50 years, not because the humans could not win, but because they refused to win the way they expected. They kept attacking, kept trying to find the glorious battle that would end everything one way or another. The humans kept denying them. Eventually, they started to fracture. Different factions formed. Some wanted to keep fighting. Some wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to focus on internal problems instead of chasing an enemy that would not fight back properly. Civil war broke out. The Empire tore itself apart, not from human attacks, but from its own inability to cope with an enemy that refused to play by their rules. The last died 400 years ago. Not in battle, not from human weapons. He died of old age in a human hospice, surrounded by human caretakers who had spent decades learning his language and preserving his memories. Read this account with growing horror. He recognized the pattern. It was exactly what had happened to the Concordat, exactly what was happening to the right now. This is what they do, he whispered to himself. This is what they have always done. He searched the archives for more. He found the Ascendancy, a hive-mind species that had attacked humanity 800 years ago. Same pattern. Disabled, not destroyed. Preserved, not erased. The last queen had lived out her days in a specially designed habitat on Mars, her history recorded by human scholars. He found the silicon minds of 7 artificial intelligences that had tried to eliminate all organic life 4 centuries ago. The humans had isolated them, studied them, eventually convinced them that coexistence was possible. The silicon minds still existed, in a way. Their descendants worked alongside humans in the coalition's technology division. He found dozens more, species that had attacked humanity at various points in history, species that had burned human worlds and killed human people. Every single one of them had been defeated the same way. Not through destruction, but through patience. Not through revenge, but through preservation. The humans did not destroy their enemies. They inherited them. Sat in the archive for hours, surrounded by the remains of civilizations that had tried and failed to defeat humanity. He thought about his father, the general who had become a gardener. He thought about Admiral, who he had heard was still alive, still serving his sentence, still slowly transforming into something different. He thought about his own people, the warriors who had defined themselves by death in battle. Now they were becoming something else. Farmers and teachers and builders. Parents who taught their children that there was honor in creation as well as destruction. Found him there, still sitting among the artifacts. "You look like you have seen a ghost," she said. "I have seen many ghosts," replied. "Every species in this building is a ghost. The silicon minds, all of them are gone, and yet," he gestured at the displays around them, "all of them are still here, preserved, remembered, inherited." Sat down beside him. "Is that not a good thing, that they are not forgotten?" Did not answer immediately. He thought about what it meant to be inherited. Your culture studied and your language taught in schools, your art displayed in museums, your children's children growing up speaking new languages, following new customs, becoming part of something larger. Was it destruction, or was it continuation? "My people believed in the warrior's death," he said finally. "We believed that the way you died was more important than the way you lived. We wanted to be remembered as heroes, as legends, as cautionary tales told around fires for 1,000 generations." He looked at the holographic image of the last, an old creature with tired eyes and silver skin faded to gray. "Instead, we will be remembered as a chapter in someone else's history, a lesson about how violence solves nothing, a footnote in the human story." "Is that worse than being forgotten entirely?" asked. "I do not know," admitted. "I truly do not know." They sat in silence for a long time. Around them, the remains of dead civilization stood as testament to humanity's strange and terrible mercy. Later that day, wrote a report about his findings. He titled it "The Pattern of Inheritance: How Humanity Defeats Its Enemies." He submitted it to the Archive's academic journal, expecting it to be read by a few scholars and then forgotten. Instead, the report spread across the coalition like fire. Within weeks, millions of people had read it, and humans alike discussed its implications. Some were horrified by what they read. They called the humans manipulative and cruel. They said the policy of preservation was worse than genocide because it erased cultures while keeping bodies alive. Others were grateful. They pointed out that they were still alive, still able to have children, still able to make choices. Extinction was forever. Transformation, however painful, left room for hope. The debate raged for months. Found himself at the center of it, interviewed by journalists, invited to speak at universities, asked to explain what he had found. Through it all, he kept thinking about his father, the proud general who had died peacefully in his garden. Had he been destroyed, or had he found something better? Decided to visit the place where his father was buried. It was a small cemetery on Prime, surrounded by trees that humans had helped plant after the occupation. His father's grave was simple, just a stone with a name and 2 dates. As stood there, an old human woman approached him. She was bent with age, her hair white, her face lined with decades of life. "You are son," she said. It was not a question. "You knew my father." "I was one of his counselors," she said. "I worked with him for 30 years. Felt his throat tighten. "Was it worth it, what you did to him, what you did to all of us?" The old woman was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. "When I first met your father, he tried to kill me. He tried to kill himself 17 times in the first year. He hated us. He hated everything we represented." She paused. "When I last saw him, a few months before he died, he told me he was grateful. He said he had lived long enough to see us grow up. He said he had learned things he never would have learned as a warrior. He said he had found peace." "But he did not choose that peace," said. "You forced it on him." "Yes," the woman admitted. "We forced him to live. We forced him to grow. We forced him to change." She looked with old, tired eyes. "Was that wrong? Should we have let him die hating himself? Should we have let him escape into death before he had a chance to become something better?" Did not have an answer. The woman reached out and touched his arm gently. "Your father used to ask me the same questions. He never found perfect answers either. But in the end, he said something that I have never forgotten." "What did he say?" "He said, 'I am glad you did not let me die, because the man I was then was not worth dying for. The man I became, the man I am now, he is worth living for.'" The old woman walked away, leaving alone with his father's grave and his own uncertain thoughts. He stayed there until sunset, watching the light change over the trees. Human and trees growing together, roots intertwined beneath the soil. Maybe that was what inheritance meant. Not destruction, not continuation, something new, something that had not existed before, something that could only grow from the soil of what had been. Knelt and touched his father's gravestone. "I think I understand now," he whispered. "I think I finally understand." He did not know if he believed it yet, but for the first time since he had started reading about he felt something that might have been hope. 50 years had passed since the burning of New Meridian, remembered the exact date, though he wished he did not. The memory came to him every year on the anniversary, the orange glow of the bombardment, the silence of the dead world, the satisfaction he had felt watching it burn. That satisfaction had long since turned to ash in his mouth. He was old now, older than any had ever been before the humans came, 147 years old. His scales had faded from dark gray to pale silver. His movements were slow, his joints stiff, but his mind remained sharp, sharpened by decades of reading and thinking and remembering. Today he was returning to New Meridian for the first time since the war. The Rehabilitation Board had approved his request after 30 years of applications. They said he was ready. They said the victims' families had been consulted. They said it was time. Was not sure he was ready. He was not sure he would ever be ready, but he went anyway. The shuttle descended through clouds that had not existed 50 years ago. The atmosphere had been destroyed in the bombardment, but the humans had rebuilt it. It had taken them 30 years, using technology still did not understand. Now New Meridian had air again, water again, life again. The shuttle landed in a place that had once been a city. There was no city now. Instead, there was a garden. A memorial garden, they called it. A place to remember the 2 million who had died. Stepped off the shuttle on unsteady legs. A human official met him, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and professional manner. She explained the layout of the memorial, the rules for visitors, the location of the counseling services if he needed them. He barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on the garden. It was beautiful. Trees of 100 species from 100 worlds, flowers in every color imaginable, paths winding between pools of clear water, birds singing songs that sounded like nothing he had ever heard before. And in the center of the garden, a wall of black stone, polished to a mirror shine, stretching for kilometers in every direction. 2 million names carved into the stone. Every person who had died on the day had given his order. He walked toward the wall. His feet moved without conscious thought, carrying him closer to the thing he had been avoiding for half a century. The names grew larger as he approached. Individual letters became visible, then individual names. Maya, age 7. Thomas, age 83. And ages 34 and 36, parents of 2. Reached out and touched the stone. It was warm from the sun, smooth beneath his clawed fingers, real, solid, permanent. He had read every one of these names. He had studied every one of these lives. He knew that Maya had loved to draw pictures of birds. He knew that Thomas had been a retired teacher who still tutored neighborhood children. He knew that and had been planning to have a 3rd child. He knew them all, and he had killed them all. His legs gave out beneath him. He knelt on the grass in front of the wall and pressed his forehead against the stone. "I am sorry," he whispered. The words felt useless. They had always felt useless, but they were all he had. "I am so sorry." He stayed there for a long time. Hours, maybe. He lost track. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows shifted and lengthened. Other visitors came and went, humans and aliens alike, all of them paying their respects to the dead. No one disturbed him. The humans understood that some grief could not be rushed. Eventually, a voice spoke from behind him. "Admiral." He turned his head. A young stood there, a female barely 30 years old. She was different from any he had known in his youth. She wore civilian clothes instead of uniform. She had paint stains on her hands, suggesting she was an artist. And she looked at him without fear, without hatred, with something that might have been compassion. "I am," he said. His voice was hoarse from weeping. "Who are you?" "My name is, I am a journalist. I was hoping to interview you about your experiences." "Have you not heard enough about my experiences? I have told my story 1,000 times." "I have heard the official version," said. "The version in the history books, but today is the 50th anniversary. I wanted to ask you something different." struggled to his feet. His old body protested, but he managed. "What do you want to ask?" Looked at the wall of names, then back at him. "Do you understand now what the warning meant?" The question hit like a blow. He had been asked many questions over the years, but never this one, not so directly. "Yes," he said slowly, "I understand now." "Can you explain it to me, for the people who will read my article?" Turned back to face the wall. 2 million names, 2 million lives, 2 million opportunities that he had to people who had done nothing wrong. "The warning said that humans would deny us every final opportunity," he began. "I thought it meant they would deny us victory in battle. I was wrong." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Even after 50 years, the words were difficult. For though the final opportunity was death, death in battle, death with honor, death that would make us legends, that would inspire future generations, that would ensure we were remembered forever. He touched the stone again. "When I attacked New Meridian, I expected the humans to respond the same way. I expected them to burn our worlds. I expected them to grant us the war we craved. But they did not. No, they did not." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They us the death we wanted. They kept us alive. They made us face what we had done. They made us change." "And you believe that was worse than destruction?" Thought about the question carefully. He had spent 50 years thinking about it. "At first, yes, I would have preferred any death to the shame of what they did to me. They took away my identity. They took away everything I believed about honor and glory and what it meant to be a warrior." He paused. "But now I am not sure." "Why not?" Turned to look at the young journalist. She was everything he had never been: peaceful, creative, curious about the universe rather than eager to conquer it. She was what they were becoming under human guidance. "Because I have lived long enough to see something else," he said. "I have lived long enough to see children like you grow up without the weight of warrior honor crushing them. I have lived long enough to see my people learn that there are things worth living for, not just things worth dying for." He gestured at the garden around them. "Look at this place. 50 years ago it was ash. I made it ash. Now it is alive again. The humans could have left it dead as a monument to our evil. Instead, they made it beautiful. They made it a place where life grows from death." Was quiet for a moment. Then she asked another question. "Do you think the humans were right to do what they did?" "I do not know if right is the correct word," admitted. "What they did was painful. It was humiliating. It broke something inside us that took decades to heal. Many of us never healed at all. Many of us spent our whole lives hating them for not letting us die." He looked up at the sky, where human and ships traveled together between the stars. "But I think about the alternative. If the humans had responded to New Meridian with another New Meridian, if they had burned Prime and every other world we held, we would have died. We would have become the villains in history books, the monsters who started a war they could not finish. And our children would never have existed. Our would never have been born. So it was worth it." "I cannot answer that," said. "I killed 2 million people. Nothing I do will ever make that worth it. Nothing I say will ever give them their lives back. But," he paused, struggling with words that had taken 50 years to form, "but I have spent the second half of my life trying to become someone different, someone who does not kill, someone who creates instead of destroys. Someone who might, in some small way, honor the memory of the people I murdered by trying to prevent others from making the same mistakes I made." "Is that redemption?" "No," shook his head firmly. "There is no redemption for what I did. Redemption suggests that the wrong has been made right. The wrong can never be made right. 2 million people are dead, and they will always be dead." He touched the wall one more time. "The best I can hope for is transformation. I can hope that the man I am now is better than the man I was then. I can hope that my continued existence serves some purpose beyond mere survival. I can hope that, when I finally die, the universe will be slightly better for my having lived the second half of my life differently than the first." recorded everything he said. She asked more questions about his experiences, his rehabilitation, his thoughts on the human methods of dealing with enemies, answered as honestly as he could. When the interview was over, she thanked him and turned to leave. Then she stopped. "Admiral, one more question." "Yes." "Children play in this garden. Human children and children together. I saw some of them earlier before I came to talk to you. Some of them were hybrid children, human and mixed." Nodded, he had seen them too. They were common now in the coalition. Two species that had been enemies 50 years ago, now having children together. It still surprised him sometimes. "The final opportunity," said slowly. "The thing the warned about, I think I understand it now." "Tell me." "The final opportunity was to be remembered as monsters, to be the villains in the story, to have our children and look back at us with horror and shame." She looked at the hybrid children playing in the distance. "The humans us that. They made us change. They made us part of their story instead of the enemies in it. They took away our chance to be remembered as pure evil." Felt tears forming in his old eyes. He had never heard it expressed quite that way before. "Yes," he said, "that is exactly what they did." "And that is the mercy of all," said. "Because now, instead of being remembered as monsters, we will be remembered as people who made terrible mistakes and then grew." "Is that worse?" Smiled sadly. "I do not know, but I think it might be better, at least for the children." She left, stood alone in the garden, watching the hybrid children play. They were laughing. They were chasing each other through the flowers. They had no idea that they were running across ground that had once been soaked in ash and blood. Maybe that was the point. Maybe that was what the humans had wanted all along. Not revenge, not punishment, just this: children playing, flowers growing, life continuing. An old human woman approached him. She walked slowly, leaning on a cane, but her eyes were sharp and clear. Recognized her. Sarah Park, the counselor who had worked with him for decades, the woman who had helped him become something different. "You came," she said. "I had to." "How do you feel?" Considered the question. He felt many things: grief, shame, something that might have been peace, and something else, something he had never expected to feel in this place. "I feel grateful," he said. The words surprised him. "I feel grateful that you did not let me die." Sarah nodded slowly. "I knew you would understand eventually. It just took time." 50 years. "Yes, but you had 50 years to use, 50 years to change, 50 years to become someone better." She looked at the children playing in the garden. "And now those children exist. They would not exist if we had responded to hate with hate. They would not exist if we had burned your worlds the way you burned ours." "Is that why you did it? For the children who would come later?" "Partly," Sarah said, "but also for you, for your people. We believed that you could change. We believed that given enough time, enough patience, enough love, even the worst of us could become something better." "Not all of us did," said. "Some of my people died still hating you. Some of them never changed." "I know we could not save everyone, but we saved enough. And the ones we saved had children, and those children had children. And now," she gestured at the garden, at the memorial, at the world that had been reborn from ashes, "now we have this." Stood in silence for a long moment. Then he spoke the words he had been unable to speak for 50 years. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for not giving me what I deserved. Thank you for giving me what I needed." Sarah smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of someone who had spent a lifetime doing difficult work, but it was genuine. "That is what we do," she said. "We deny our enemies the chance to remain enemies. We take away their final opportunity to be monsters, and we replace it with something better, a chance to grow, a chance to change, a chance to become part of something larger than hate and revenge." She turned and walked away, leaving alone in the garden. He stayed until sunset. He watched the light fade over the memorial wall, over the flowers, over the children who had gone home with their parents. He watched the stars appear, one by one, in a sky that had been restored through decades of patient work. Somewhere up there, human and ships traveled together. Somewhere up there, the species that had once tried to destroy each other were building something new. Somewhere up there, the future was being written. And the last great admiral of the galactic Concordat, the monster who had burned New Meridian, the old man who had spent 50 years trying to become someone better, stood alone in a garden of remembrance and finally understood what they had tried to tell them. The humans did not defeat their enemies. They transformed them. They did not grant the final opportunity of glorious death. They replaced it with the long, painful, beautiful work of becoming something new. It was the kindness imaginable. It was the most terrible mercy ever devised, and it had saved them all. Knelt one final time before the wall of names. 2 million names, 2 million lives, 2 million reasons why he could never truly be forgiven. But forgiveness, he understood now, was not the point. The point was what came after. The point was the children. The point was the garden. The point was the future that grew from the ashes of the past. "I will tell your story," he whispered to the names on the wall. "I will make sure you are never forgotten, and I will spend whatever time I have left trying to make sure no one ever does what I did again." It was not enough. It would never be enough, but it was all he had. And somewhere, in the deepest part of his ancient heart, finally found something he had never expected to find. Peace. Not forgiveness, not redemption, just peace. The peace of knowing that the story was not over. The peace of knowing that even the worst beginning could lead to a better ending. The peace of knowing that the humans had been right all along. Death was an escape. Life was the real punishment. And in the end, life was also the only thing that could lead to something better. The final opportunity had been, and was grateful.